Look at this map of the Russia-Ukraine border. Now imagine Ukrainian flags planted on the Russian side. It's not just imagination, it's reality. Ukraine's recent incursion into the Kursk region has redrawn the battle lines of this conflict in ways few could have predicted. This represents more than just a tactical victory. It symbolizes a shift in the balance of power, a crack in the facade of Russian military might. Today we're going to explore what this means. On February 24th, 2022, as Russian forces launched a multi-pronged invasion of Ukraine. The initial assault was brutal and effective. Russian troops poured across the border, their advance seeming unstoppable as they pushed deep into Ukrainian territory. Key strategic locations fell quickly, and the Russian military appeared to be executing a well-orchestrated plan to decapitate the Ukrainian government and install a pro-Moscow regime. However, as the invasion unfolded, it became increasingly clear that both Russia and Western analysts had severely underestimated Ukrainian military capabilities and national resolve. The Ukrainian armed forces, bolstered by a surge of civilian volunteers, mounted a fierce resistance that caught the invaders off guard. Instead of capitulating, Ukraine's military and its people dug in, transforming cities into fortresses and rural areas into deadly terrain for Russian forces. The expected swift victory for Russia turned into a grinding conflict. Ukrainian soldiers, utilizing a combination of modern anti-tank weapons supplied by Western allies and innovative tactics, began to inflict significant losses on Russian armored columns. The Ukrainian Air Force, though outnumbered, managed to deny Russia total air superiority, a crucial factor that many had assumed would be quickly established. Ukraine not only halted the Russian advance, but also started to push back. In a series of counteroffensives, Ukrainian forces reclaimed territory, particularly around Kiev, forcing Russian troops to retreat. This unexpected turn of events shattered the myth of Russian military invincibility and revealed deep-seated issues within its command structure and logistical capabilities. The world watched in astonishment as David began to hold his ground against Goliath. Ukraine's ability to resist and counter the Russian invasion defied early predictions and set the stage for a prolonged conflict. This unexpected resilience transformed what many thought would be a quick operation into a war of attrition, testing not just military might but also national will and international support. The embattled nation was preparing to turn the tables on its formidable adversary. What audacious strategy would propel Ukraine from besieged defender to bold attacker? The transformation of Ukraine's military approach began with a series of successful counter-offensives that caught both Russian forces and international observers by surprise. Ukrainian forces managed to push Russian troops back to the border in a matter of days. This rapid advance not only liberated a significant portion of Ukrainian territory, but also dealt a severe blow to Russian morale and exposed critical weaknesses in their military planning and logistics. Emboldened by these successes, Ukraine's military leadership recognized a pivotal moment in the conflict. They understood that maintaining a purely defensive posture would ultimately favor Russia's superior numbers and resources. Instead, they began to contemplate more ambitious operations that could fundamentally alter the dynamics of the war. This strategic shift was not merely a product of increased confidence. It was a calculated decision based on a growing understanding of Russian vulnerabilities and the changing nature of the conflict. Western support played a crucial role in enabling this strategic pivot. The influx of advanced weaponry, including precision-guided artillery systems, anti-tank missiles, and sophisticated reconnaissance drones, provided Ukraine with capabilities that could rival and, in some cases, surpass those of their Russian counterparts. Moreover, Western intelligence sharing and training programs helped Ukrainian forces develop more effective tactics and operational planning skills. With these new tools and knowledge at their disposal, the Ukrainian military began carefully planning operations designed to strike at Russia's vulnerabilities. They identified key weaknesses in Russian defensive lines, supply routes, and command structures. Ukrainian strategists also recognized the psychological impact that offensive actions on Russian soil could have on both enemy forces and the Russian populace. This daring maneuver, executed with precision and surprise, marked a dramatic turning point in the conflict's dynamics. The Kursk incursion achieved multiple strategic objectives. First, it forced Russia to divert significant resources to defend its own territory, easing pressure on Ukrainian front lines. Second, it shattered the myth of Russian invincibility and the notion that the war would be confined to Ukrainian soil. Finally, it sent a powerful message to both international allies and the Russian leadership about Ukraine's resolve and capabilities. The Russian military response to the the Kursk invasion was surprisingly slow and disorganized. Years of corruption, mismanagement, and overconfidence had left border defenses in a state of disrepair. Many Russian units stationed near the border were understrength, poorly equipped, and caught completely unprepared for an attack on home soil. This lack of readiness allowed Ukrainian forces to make significant initial gains before facing any substantial resistance. As Ukrainian troops pushed further into the Kursk region, they encountered pockets of fierce resistance, but also areas where Russian forces simply melted away. The operation revealed deep-seated issues within the Russian military structure, including poor communication between units, inadequate training for conscripts, and a general lack of morale among troops who had been told they were fighting a limited special operation in Ukraine. Within days, Ukrainian forces had successfully captured several strategic locations within Russian territory. More importantly, they'd taken a number of Russian prisoners of war, including several high-ranking officers. These POWs would prove to be valuable sources of intelligence, providing Ukrainian and Western analysts with unprecedented insights into the state of the Russian military machine. According to their sources within the military, years of corruption and mismanagement had left many units critically understaffed and under-equipped. The paper reported instances of soldiers being sent to the front lines with outdated weaponry and insufficient ammunition, a far cry from the image of a modern, well-oiled war machine that Russia had projected to the world. One of the most glaring weaknesses exposed by the Kursk invasion was Russia's heavy reliance on poorly trained conscripts. These young soldiers, often with just a few months of basic training, found themselves facing battle-hardened Ukrainian forces who had been fighting for their homeland for years. The disparity in skill and motivation was palpable, with many Russian conscripts surrendering or fleeing at the first sign of serious resistance. Equipment shortages and logistical issues continued to plague Russian forces, even as they scrambled to respond to the Ukrainian incursion. Intercepted communications revealed frantic requests for fuel, spare parts, and even basic supplies like food and water. This breakdown in the supply chain not only hindered Russia's ability to mount an effective defense, but also sapped morale among troops who felt abandoned by their command structure. Perhaps most alarming for Russian military planners was the exposure of significant gaps in their intelligence gathering and early warning systems. The fact that Ukrainian forces were able to penetrate so deeply into Russian territory before encountering serious resistance pointed to a catastrophic failure in border surveillance and threat assessment. This blind spot allowed Ukraine to achieve tactical surprise, a crucial factor in the success of their operation. As the extent of these weaknesses became clear, Russian military leadership was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths. The invasion of Kursk wasn't just a tactical setback, it was a wake-up call that demanded a fundamental reconsideration of Russia's entire military strategy. Long-held assumptions about their superiority in conventional warfare were shattered, and the need for sweeping reforms became undeniable. The success of Ukraine's daring gambit challenged preconceived notions about Russian military superiority that had persisted since the Cold War era. Western analysts who had long cautioned about overestimating Russian capabilities found their assessments validated in the most dramatic fashion possible. The image of an unstoppable Russian war machine, carefully cultivated through years of military parades and propaganda, was crumbling in real time as the world watched. Moscow found itself in the unenviable position of having to secure its own territory. Redistribution of forces had a domino effect on Russia's military presence in occupied Ukrainian regions. As troops were hastily pulled from the front lines to bolster defenses within Russian borders, it left significant gaps in their offensive capabilities. This redeployment wasn't just a matter of shifting personnel, it necessitated a complete overhaul of Russia's logistical operations. Supply lines that had been established to support the invasion of Ukraine were now strained as resources were diverted to defend against an unexpected threat on home soil. The disruption of these crucial supply chains had far-reaching implications, affecting everything from ammunition resupply to food distribution for Russian forces. Moreover, the Kursk incursion provided Ukraine with an unprecedented opportunity to gather intelligence. As Ukrainian forces penetrated deeper into Russian territory, they gained valuable insights into the disposition and capabilities of Russian military units. This first-hand information was worth its weight in gold, offering Ukrainian strategists a clearer picture of their adversary's strengths and weaknesses. The psychological impact of the invasion on both Russian troops and civilians was profound. For soldiers who had been told they were engaged in a limited special operation in Ukraine, the reality of fighting on Russian soil was a shock to the system. Morale, already low due to the prolonged conflict, plummeted further as the myth of Russian invincibility was shattered. Among civilians, the incursion sparked fear and uncertainty, challenging the narrative of security that the Russian government had carefully cultivated. From a broader strategic perspective, Ukraine's action effectively altered the balance of the entire war. By forcing Russia to adopt a defensive posture within its own borders, Ukraine gained a degree of initiative it had not previously enjoyed.